Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at something really fascinating, I think. It's this kind of paradox, how ideas that seem universally good, like liberation, can actually end up clashing with national identity. We're going deep into this today, specifically looking at Iran and how things like Western feminism, Western beauty standards have really interacted with Iranian patriotism and identity in some unique ways.
Yeah, it's definitely complex. There's a lot of layers here. And we're drawing heavily from a source called The Hijacking of Iranian Patriotism by Western Ideology. It's a pretty critical take, which is interesting. It forces you to think about how these global ideas land differently depending on the specific cultural soil, so to speak. We really want to explore that nuance.
Okay, so let's kick off with Western feminism. I mean, usually it's seen globally as this positive force, right, for equality, liberation.
Right, that's the common perception.
Yeah.
But this source flips that script pretty quickly. It argues that in Iran, especially after the '79 revolution, it wasn't always seen that way. It was perceived sometimes as, well, as an ideological tool.
A tool. How so?
The argument is that it was allegedly used, perhaps strategically, to sort of chip away at national identity, maybe undermine traditional values, and kind of subtly push Western cultural norms as superior. It's a different way of looking at its impact over there, definitely.
Okay, that's quite a claim, strategically employed. What was the background noise, the context for that kind of perception?
Yeah, you absolutely need the geopolitical picture here. After '79, the new government in Iran was a big challenge to Western influence. So the source suggests Western powers like the U.S. were looking for ways to, undermine the Islamic Republic. Framing it as repressive was part of that.
And feminism fit into that.
Apparently so. It became a sort of primary ideological angle. The critique wasn't just about women's rights, according to this perspective, but part of a bigger strategy to discredit a government seen as, well, problematic to Western interests.
So by focusing on women's issues through this Western lens, they could look progressive,
Exactly. Position themselves as champions.
while painting Iran as, like, stuck in the past,
Yeah.
kind of weaponizing the issue.
That's precisely the source implies weaponization. And this created a real split. You had Iranian patriotism, which is tied up in all this cultural, historical, religious stuff,
Right.
clashing head on with this narrative being pushed from the outside. It felt like more than just a policy debate. It felt like an attack on identity itself, cultural subversion, basically.
Okay, that covers the sort of big picture ideology, but let's make it more concrete. You mentioned beauty standards. That's something really visible, tangible.
Oh, absolutely. It's maybe one of the most striking examples. The source talks about the huge boom in plastic surgery, especially nose jobs, rhinoplasty. Tehran's even been called the nose job capital of the world. That's significant. Millions of people choosing to alter their features.
Wow. Millions. What's behind that? Just wanting to look different, or is it deeper?
It seems deeper. The source points to, social pressure, media images, mostly Western images of beauty. So specific features, lighter skin, thinner noses, more angular faces become the ideal, not just for beauty, but sometimes linked to success, modernity.
And the implication is that people feel they need to look less Persian.
That's the connection the source makes, yeah. This feeling that you need to erase or change your natural features to fit a more Eurocentric look. It really says something about collective identity, doesn't it? When people feel the need to physically change to match an external ideal.
It does. And there's a real irony here, historically speaking. Ancient Persia was famous for its beauty, admired by Greeks, Romans, Persian women seen as beautiful worldwide.
Exactly. It's a fascinating historical twist.
And now you have women in modern Iran undergoing surgery to get features that are essentially Western ideals, kind of erasing that unique heritage.
It is a powerful shift. And sometimes, it gets framed as empowerment, like it's my choice, maybe linked loosely to feminist ideas of bodily autonomy. But the source argues that even if it feels like a choice, it might be subconsciously reinforcing Western cultural dominance, erasing ethnic identity under this banner of being modern or free. It's a subtle point, but an important one.
Okay, so let's circle back to feminism itself. It clearly had supporters among Iranian women genuinely seeking equality.
Oh, for sure. There's a long history there.
But this alignment with Western values, the one we've been discussing, must have caused friction internally, right?
Huge friction. See, Iranian women had been fighting for rights within their own cultural context for ages, sometimes making real progress. But then comes this version of feminism that seems tied to Western norms, almost dismissing local values, saying this is the only way to be liberated.
And the hijab debate was central to this, wasn't it?
Absolutely central. the most obvious flashpoint. From a Western feminist perspective, often the hijab was just seen as oppression. Full stop.
But that wasn't necessarily how all Iranian women saw it.
Not at all, according to the source. For many, it was and is tied to cultural identity, religious belief, a personal choice, not simply subjugation. So when Western feminists basically said hijab equals oppression, it alienated many Iranian women. It felt like their own understanding of their lives, their choices, their identity was being ignored or dictated to them.
So the imported agenda kind of set the terms, like, you're oppressed and freedom looks like this our way. It took away their power to define liberation for themselves.
Exactly. It removed their agency in that sense. And the source argues this has been, destabilizing for Iranian identity. It leaves people, especially women, caught between their own cultural roots and this constant pressure to conform to external Western ideals. It's a tough spot.
Right. Now, zooming out again, this wasn't just happening in a vacuum. This use of feminism, these cultural debates, they fed into the larger geopolitical game between Iran and the West.
Definitely. It's crucial to see that link. Iran's resistance to some aspects of Western-backed feminism wasn't just about gender politics. It was tied up, source says, with defending national sovereignty, cultural integrity, identity itself. Culture became a key battleground.
And if you can paint a country as backward on women's rights,
It undermines their government's legitimacy on the world stage. It can be used to rally support for pressure, even regime change. It shows how powerful cultural narratives can be in international relations.
So wrapping this up, it seems this struggle, this tension over cultural identity versus external influence, particularly from the West, is still very much alive in Iran. It shapes so much.
It really does. And looking forward, the challenge for Iran, as the source suggests, is navigating this. How do you engage with global ideas like gender equality while holding on to your own unique identity, your own values? For Iranian women specifically, the implication is that the path to empowerment needs to be defined from within, on their own terms, free from this external ideological pressure or cultural dominance.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about how these big universal ideals play out on the ground, how they sometimes collide with identities that are deeply rooted in culture and nationhood, especially in our interconnected world. Lots to ponder there. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.